line Git. This course is designed for data scientists and non-developers who want to learn how to use Git through the command line. So, what is Git? Git is the technology used for backing up and maintaining versions of your work files. Usually, this is computer code. So why does Git matter? Well, Git enables you to collaborate with other teams, such as engineering teams, and easily share and track your work, especially with services like GitLab, GitHub, and Bitbucket. To get started, you will need to install Git and set up a free account with Course. We will be using GitHub. Installing Git on Apple computers is easy. It may auto-install when you attempt to clone your first repository, such as typing that git clone command in your terminal. Otherwise, it can be installed via Homebrew with the noted link below. Installing on Linux is just as easy. Depending on your flavor of Linux, you can install Git using apt or yum. For Windows, there is an alternative to use the installer found in gitforwindows.org. So, if you don't have Git installed, take a moment to choose the installation that's appropriate for your computer. Do that and we'll get started. Okay, so what we're going to do here is actually create a GitHub account. I'll start by opening up my browser and going to github.com. You'll see that the initial page has an area to set up your account where you'll enter your username and email and password. I will keep my username consistent with my email handle just for simplicity, but you can use any account you want, of course. So now I'll enter my email. And my password. So take one real quick. Okay, sign up. And in this screen, I'm going to be asked to solve a quick puzzle. So I'll just turn this around real quick and then join the free plan. Once I join the free plan, basically asked to kind of identify myself. So I'm just going to check some default things. I'll put other, put that I have very little experience programming, and just other again. Then after that, I'll be asked to verify my email address. So they'll send me a verification email, which here on the screen you see that I received. So like now I'm just gonna verify my email address, and after doing so, I'm taken to this particular page, and that's it. So next what we want to do is actually create a repository. So we'll click on this link here, create a repository. Next we want to give our repository a name, and the name we'll give it as demo. Then we can add a description to it. This is completely optional, but I'll just place, this is my demo repository. That should be good enough. Good. Next, we need to decide if we're going to make this a public repository where anyone can view it, or a private one where we restrict access. So we'll leave it as public. And these next options we can skip for now, as we will come back to them later and create our repository. So here we're taken to our repository page. We just created it. You can see we have basically a folder called demo and some commands that we will get into later in the course. So I want to quickly recap what we have done so far up to this point. The first thing that we did was create an account with a cloud provider called GitHub. After creating the account, we created a repository and gave it a name, demo. So we have cloud-based GitHub repository. So now that you have created your Git repository, you're going to find that you have some settings or some commands that you recommended to execute for your repository. But we won't do that just yet. In fact, we're going to want to go into our account settings and get to the place where we can set up what's called an SSH key. So in your upper right hand menu, go to settings. Then we will find the menu that says SSH and GPG keys. Here is where we'll be entering an SSH key that we will be generating locally on our laptop so that we can securely communicate with GitHub and store our files. So once I click on that key, we'll have a title, and really in that key box is where we will enter or paste our key value that we generate. So the next thing that I want to do is look to generate some SSH keys to place into this box. What I'm going to do is open up my terminal, and before anything I want to check to see that I don't have an IDRSA or IDRSA.pub file in my SSH folder. So we'll check to see if that exists and list the contents. And so I see that I don't have that particular file, although I do have some other keys. So I'll proceed with generating some keys. Now yours is probably going to be blank. If it's not, then skip this step. But basically, I'm going to issue the command SSH keygen, then the -t parameter, selecting the RSA encryption, and then follow it with your email. So type it as is on the screen with your email, and that will prompt you to create a new file by default. And this is your private key, so it'll save there in that SSH directory. So we'll just go ahead and hit enter since it doesn't exist. I don't necessarily want to set a passphrase, so I'll hit enter there, and then again here. And so now my SSH keys have generated. So if I view my directory listing, now I see that I have both an ID_RSA pub file, which is my public key, and then ID_RSA file, which is my private key. So we'll be using those in a little bit. After we've generated the SSH key, we want to copy it into our GitHub account. One way to display our SSH key contents is via the cat command, which will render it on our screen. So the key I'm going to focus on, or the file I'm going to focus on, is ID_RSA pub. This is the one that I'm going to paste into GitHub right in this key box. So I'll just hit enter, and I can essentially just highlight my public key on my screen and then copy that and paste it in that key box. And I'll give mine a title as well. You can give it any title that you want. I'll give mine this title, add the key. You might be prompted for a password, so enter that. And now you'll see that you have your SSH keys. And so you can have multiple SSH keys if you're connecting from various places or various computers, laptops. So let's take a moment to recap what we just finished doing a little while ago. So to begin with, we generated two keys, basically an ID_RSA private key and ID_RSA public key. The public key is what we will share with GitHub, and that's what we ended up pasting in the key section, so that now our computer can communicate with GitHub in a secure and authenticated, identified fashion. So the next thing that we want to do is actually make a copy or clone our repository to our computer. We'll go to our demo repository. Once we click on that link, we'll see that we are in our demo repository that we created earlier. So open up the terminal, choose a location where you want to create your folder. In my case, I'm going to create it in my Git folder, in my home directory. And I'll list out that I don't have any folders here, just like an examples folder. That's the only directory. So my next thing to do is actually clone the repository and pull down this repo folder. So I'll copy the SSH command onto my clipboard, and then I'll type git clone and paste that command. And before I hit enter, again, I just want to show really quickly that we are copying this repository. There are no files, just some, kind of basic instructions. So then I'll hit enter, and I'll be given a message like, basically, do I trust this connection? And there we go. Now I will have an empty repository because there is nothing in that particular repository right now. So the next thing that I want to do is create a readme.md file, MD standing for Markdown. README files provide information in a visual way about your repository, and we'll look at that later. So the first thing that I want to do is list out my contents and change into my newly cloned demo folder. So now that I'm in there, I'll see that I don't have any files with the exception of this .git settings file, which I could ignore in my new cloned directory. So now I'm going to create the README file via nano, so type nano readme.md for the markdown file. And within my command line editor, I will place or type 2 hashtags and essentially say, this is my sandbox repo. So the 2 hashtags are markdown language, and that's all I need for now, really. So I'll save this file by typing Control X, then yes or Y, and then enter, and that'll create my new file. So if I list my contents one more time, I see that I have my README file. Now, you can create this file with any other text editor of choice, such as Atom, Node++, or anything that you might have installed on your laptop.